I wanna be the very best.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast bonus episode. I'm Zach, of course.
And I'm Evan. How's it going?
And today we're going to be talking about something very dear to our hearts. Well, something that's very dear to my heart and something that's very dear to Evan's heart.
Yes.
But not-
Except that mine is better.
Uh,
And louder.
yeah. Well, that's very debatable. And funny word debate, because that's what we're doing today.
Ah, wonderful.
So today, as you heard from the intro theme, we're going to be doing Pokemon versus Digimon. And as a lot of people know, this has a very, very tight history. They've always been competing.
It's kind of a dedicated battle, sort of.
Yeah.
Sort of. I mean,
Yeah.
they were never directly trying to compete against each other, but they were two major shows happening at the same time. And it really divided a lot of their fan base quite exclusively. So it's always been kind of a back part of their history, that they were in direct competition or something of that nature.
Yeah. So what we're going to be doing is Evan is going to be our regional Pokemon expert.
How's it going?
And I'm going to be the regional Digimon expert. We both know about each other's series quite well.
Mm-hmm.
And this probably isn't going to be much of a debate, more than just a...
This is going to be more of a compare and contrast kind of thing, to kind of give an overview of the similarities and the differences in the show that made them so compelling and helped to divide the fan base as such.
But we're still going to be assigning points
Of
and
course.
see who actually wins.
But it's just like Who's Line. All the points are made up and nothing matters.
Yep. And just to make sure that the points really don't matter, we have two dedicated judges who are paying attention to every
no
word that we
attention.
said.
Love you guys.
Colin and Sarah.
Hello, I'm Cullen.
Hi.
The tiny voice was Sarah.
Our talkative judge, Sarah.
So when we finish a subject, we're gonna go to them and see which one they think won.
All right. Well, what's our first subject, man?
Our first subject is, of course, we start with the story.
The
So
story.
Pokemon, do you want to go first?
Sure, why not? Pokemon is actually a coming-of-age story of a young man named Red, or Ash, or Satoshi, depending upon what region you were in. I think at this point we should establish we are going by the American versions of the show.
And we're only going with the first 3 seasons because even Digimon fans will agree that by season 4 it kind of got pretty terrible.
Yeah, and Pokemon kind of got bad way
Yeah.
before that. But
Yeah, I kind of got that in the Johto area, which is probably around season 2, 3.
yeah.
So, yeah.
Anyway, Pokemon is a coming-of-age story about a young man named Ash. He's 10 years old, and he's given a Pokemon, which are odd battling creatures that are present in this world, and sent off to discover and conquer and train and learn about these creatures. It's apparently kind of a normal thing that happens in this world, is sort of a rite of passage when you're 10 years of age to be given a creature and sent off into the world. It's very cool. He meets a lot of interesting people along the way, has some messed up adventures, battles the gym leaders, wins the girl, stands on a mountain.
Okay, first I'm going to say, does not win the girl. Never wins the girl in any version of the series. He has a female companion, but nothing ever happens because he's 10 years old for
Come on, man.
13 years? 15 years now he's been 10 years old.
He's been 10 forever. Supposedly he's supposed to be 13 to 15
No,
now.
they said in the recent series that he's still 10.
No, he's still 10.
Yes.
Okay.
So, on my end, we have Digimon, which is, in the original series, 7 people are transported to a world that's completely digital, with creatures that can speak their language, and they are tasked with saving that world. It's kind of unique from Digimon in that each season isn't really a carryover from the last season. Season 2 is the only exception where it is directly a carryover from Season 1, but Season 3 is completely standalone. They all have basically the same idea, which is we are trying to save either the digital world or our world from an evil menace. But from there, it kind of diverges. You have different characters, you have different abilities. of course, different creatures, and really, the only overarching thing is that they're always trying to save the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, to our debating aspect, I think Digimon has a better story just overall, because Pokemon doesn't really have a story. It's always just kind of episodic, going from one place to another, and there's no end.
Well, I would definitely give Digimon the points for having a very central idea of conflict going on, because with Pokemon, the aspect is more upon the idea of expanding and growing and learning. There's some conflict with Team Rocket in there, but it's not the main focus of the story. In Digimon it is. So I would definitely give Digimon the aspect there. But I think we should ask our judges what they think before we start trying to decide who won.
Well, we're not done yet.
Oh, we're not? No. Well, let's find out.
But because I want to say that I really... The point of a story is you have a beginning, you have a goal in mind or a conflict, and you go to solve that conflict, and it ends.
In a conclusive end.
In Digimon Season 1, there is that. Sometimes they have stuff piled on top of it that they have to get to, but there is a point where they enter the digital world, they save it, and they leave. They go to their own world, they save it, and they come back. They go to that world, they save it again, and they leave. Each of those have a conclusive end, and the villain is defeated. Pokemon has no villain, has no conflict. He's trying to get all the badges. Why? To go into the Pokemon League. He goes to the Pokemon League. He loses.
Oh, granted, but he still has set goals from the beginning.
Yes, and then he solves the goals, and then it continues going.
Well, of course. And that's one of the biggest issues that we've had with the series is how long it keeps going. But still, for the original story in the original season, which was literally just get to the Elite Four, then he becomes a Pokemon Master, I'd say that's actually a pretty clear-cut goal.
That's part of the game, though. Game you go to the Elite Four. In the show, he just wants to be the best Pokemon trainer. Mm-hmm. Except that there's no defined best. He just continues...
At least not that's ever presented to us.
The point where he's supposed to be the best, they introduce another generation.
Mm-hmm. And suddenly he's the worst again.
Yes. And he's also functionally retarded.
Well, yeah.
He's in the latest season, which this isn't technically part of the argument. In the latest season, he pulls out a Pokedex to check Coughing, who he's seen since episode 2. Anyways, judges, who won that?
I'm gonna give Pokemon the definite lead here.
Okay, Colin says Pokemon.
Why?
Sarah says...
That was a very good argument against the coughing. I mean, seriously.
So, who do you say?
Oh my gosh. Then again, Digimon does have the better story, in my opinion. This Pokemon got boring after, gotta fight Team Rocket every...
Yeah, they had to fight Team Rocket every episode.
Hear that annoying-ass catchphrase.
So we basically have a tie on the judges, so we're going to say that's a tie.
Point.
Which also is the name of the main character of Digimon.
Oh, that's cute.
Yes. So now we go into the first episode. What happens in the first episode of Pokemon?
The first episode, I think, I would actually count as probably one of the best episodes of Pokemon because it basically sets the entire hierarchy into play and it ends on a great note. But the basic idea is, first we see a Pokemon. We actually see it opens up with the intro to the game, the first game.
Actually, kind of starts with the entire opening of the first game.
Yeah,
because you see the two battle, and then it introduces Professor Oak, who talks about Pokemon.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is
it
interesting.
Goes straight into the animation.
Yeah.
We're introduced to the world where Pokemon live in, they dwell in. They're part of this world. Some people study them and learn about them. Others battle with them, which I'm surprised is not horribly illegal, but it's not. We're introduced to Ash, who's 10 years old and is a wreck of a person, as most people are at 10 years old.
Yep.
We're introduced to his mother. His dad's not around. That's never really elucidated on why, but it's not important to the series in any way, so it's not ever, really dealt with. And he's late. He wakes up late for his first day of picking his Pokemon, and he gets there, and they're all gone.
Yeah.
Thankfully, he gets a backup, a defunct Pokemon, some would say, named Pikachu, who doesn't play well with others. He's a rogue who goes by his own rules.
Yep.
And they don't get along. And they continue to not get along throughout the entire first episode. Pikachu's just doing everything he can to cause Ash problems. We see Ash meet off with his rival, Gary Oak, who is the grandson of Professor Oak. And, he sets out on his day.
You want to speed this up?
I'm getting to that. They have their first battle. It's disastrous. Pikachu,
They don't battle in the first episode.
They attempt to.
Do they?
Well, he
Judges.
doesn't.
What?
That's where they meet Spearow, man. They meet Pidgey and Spearow
Yes.
in the first episode.
Yeah, but that's not Gary's.
No, not Gary. I'm talking about Ash.
Okay, you talked about Gary, and then you said he attempted to battle.
No. He tried to have his first battle with a wild Pokemon.
Yeah. Okay. There you go.
And he attempts to catch it. Doesn't work. Pikachu ends up shocking him, and he gets really mad. He knocks a Spearow in the head. It gets mad. A whole flock chases them. He ends up stealing a girl's bike, who later turns out to be Misty, who's central to the plot. And Pikachu gets seriously injured.
Hold on. Central to the plot is a very, very
Not
loose
central to the
term.
plot, but a central character.
She's
Sorry.
central in that she is a character in the plot.
Excuse me. She's not central to the plot, but she's a central character.
And then they chase Ash.
They chase Ash. He eventually manages to get away from them, with Pikachu using a huge Thunder Shock, having finally gained some respect for Ash, at least a little bit. And he's basically carrying Pikachu to the next town. Pikachu, shows a bit of affection for him, and they form a bond. And then he sees actually a rare Pokemon that doesn't show up until the next generation.
Yep. So for Digimon, I will even go ahead and say that they did not have a strong first show. It is very much an introduction episode. Pokemon had a strong suit in that it introduced them very naturally, and didn't really introduce all the characters. I think maybe Team Rocket shows up at the end, or did they show up next episode?
They didn't show up until the next episode. That
Okay.
was their first appearance.
Okay, so Digimon literally has an introductory part where they literally introduce each character through a literal introduction, saying, "This is Tai, this is Matt, this is Mimi, this is Sora." And they go through all the first 7 characters. And then it starts snowing, they get their Digivices, then they get sucked into like some portal, they get sucked into the digital world, and then they do it again with all the Digimon. This is Koromon, this is, what's his name? I can't even remember all this stupid
Write all
names.
this down.
And then they get attacked by this big bug Digimon called Quagamon, I think. Then the Digimon who are in training, which I think they explain at one point, digivolve into their rookie forms, which they become for most of the series. They're usually in their rookie forms, and they fight off this thing until it comes back, and they're knocked off a cliff into the water, and that's where it ends.
Okay.
So literally all we do is we're introduced to the fact that there are characters. We get a very basic definition as to what their personalities are. We're introduced to their creatures. We're introduced to the digital world. So in actuality, we're introduced to the same amount as Pokemon, but in a much more clunky way. Digimon gets much smoother in its story development as it goes on.
Well, it starts off very encyclopedic with how it basically
Yeah.
just dumps the knowledge on you instead of letting it come about.
Yeah, exactly. And it's problematic to a point because, Pokemon, neither series had really great story development, but Digimon was a little more clunky towards the beginning, while Pokemon was more smooth. Eventually, they'd kind of get to.
They kind of swapped eventually.
So I know who won this, but judges.
I don't even know.
Well, I'll agree that both intros are very slow, though Pokemon feels more lucid. But I'm going to have to go with Digimon.
Really?
It's important to understand who each of your characters are, their personal connection to the storyline, and the like.
Okay, Sarah.
I really liked how Pokemon actually introduced Ash, even though it just kind of gave me that idea. No, I don't know.
I'm the jury here.
See, this is what happens when you have 2 people on the jury.
We need a third.
Do we have a third?
Introducing surprise guest host.
No!
Barry White.
I died.
Why would Barry White be part of this?
He's in
Okay, so we're at tie again, but I ask our judges to not tie it up anymore.
Come to a deliberation.
Okay,
My call is your dad too, huh?
they're playing Attack on Titan, by the way, so they're paying very close attention.
I
So-
love Digimon!
I know you do. But you're playing Attack on Titan.
God, I love Attack on Titan. Sorry.
I love Digimon too, but
You both have to love Digimon and Pokemon, I'm guessing.
of course.
You're not allowed to like neither.
I wish I could have a Pokemon game, but as is.
You have a Pokemon game. We literally picked them up today.
Yeah, Digimon game.
Had several.
Anyways,
This bonus episode
beyond
is
that,
turning out great.
yeah, this is why it's a bonus episode, not a full episode.
Because we're all.
Anyways,
All right,
next
next
we
is-
have closeness to the original. Now, how close is Pokemon to the original anime?
We're talking about from the original that came from Japan.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. Okay, everybody who grew up watching Pokemon, what did Japanese donuts look like?
Rice.
No! No, they don't. They look like regular damn donuts. But they didn't let us know that because when Pokemon came to the United States, it was handed off to a company named 4Kids, Ford's Kids Entertainment, which they're kind of not good at that whole
No, 4Kids really
transition stuff.
really did.
Did quite a bad job with Pokemon in terms of maintaining the original Japanese influences that went into it.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't, I would really say, a bad thing, but I wouldn't count it as a great thing. You lose a lot, particularly in terms of crossbreeds from fandom when it comes to the different interpretations that come about of it. All the characters had different names. All the towns were interpreted differently. Most of the Pokemon had different names. And they did all they could to remove references to Japanese culture, which was pretty prominent in the world.
I will say, in this is gonna sound awful, but in defense of 4Kids, a lot of the renaming stuff didn't come from them. A lot of the renaming stuff came from the fact they're copying the game, which
had already gone through Pokemon USA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We already gone through Nintendo and Game Freaks, because Pokemon USA I don't think had become a company yet. It was still just Nintendo and Game Freaks.
Right on.
A lot of them had already renamed them, and I think even like Ash was kind of in that middle area when they were translating it. So you have a lot of the renaming stuff from the game. They did do a lot of censorship, and there were...
Oh, definitely. A lot of episodes were heavily edited.
Yeah.
And again, like I said, I'm not really counting this as like a bad or an evil corporate gimmick kind of thing. It's just, I think it was done to an extent that was unnecessary.
Yeah. And with Digimon, their renaming was more just to rename them, just to be more American. But to their credit, when they renamed it, they didn't go super far away.
Yeah.
There's still like some odd ones, like Koshiro was renamed Izzy. There's no real connection there.
Yeah.
But they more just simplified names. Like Yamato was Matt. Taichi was Tai. Takara was TK. Hikari was Kari. Stuff like that. And then the other names were just kind of not changed at all. Like Joe was Joe. Mimi was Mimi. Sora Sora. Season 2, they got a little worse about that. Like Daisuke became Davis. Miyako became Yoli. And Iori became Cody. So they got a little worse. But then you get to Season 3, and Takato is still Takato. What was Henry's Japanese name?
So they were just all over the map on this kind of thing.
Yeah, by Season 3, they kind of got
What about censorship?
weird. And censorship, they were actually very good on. I was going to point out with Pokemon, they... and we actually have a section for censorship later, so we won't get too deep into this. But yeah, I will just point out real quickly that Pokemon cut out episodes, while Digimon never cut out an episode. It cut out some scenes, but never cut out a full episode, which Pokemon did. But close to the original, all the storylines stayed the same. Some of the names were changed, but for the most part, everything was very similar. And there were no like big gaps in knowledge. I think like maybe some characters that were killed were never explicitly said that they were died. Whereas with Pokemon, there are some big gaps in story.
Yeah.
Especially, I think there's the whole Tauros thing, which comes from the fact that they cut out an episode where he catches a bunch of Tauros because he went to the Safari Zone. And then later he shows that he has them,
Yeah.
but we never really find out where he got them.
Yeah, that's just it's supposed to be implied that this is just something that happened during his adventures,
But they're both.
but it was specifically tied to the story of an episode.
Yeah, they never really changed the story in each of them. They're very close
Yeah.
in that regard, but I think Pokemon changed more the names from the original, just in general.
Yeah.
But that was both just the fact that they're copying off the American games, which did also change the names.
Yeah.
Judges!
Well, in keeping with tradition, and is definitely very important, I will go ahead and say that as far as internal, or as far as story goes, which is what's really important when you're creating a show.
Doesn't matter, you're going off our arguments.
I like Digimon because the name's still the same. There.
Okay, so Sarah says
I did
Digimon.
enjoy that. I had to learn that Kasumi was actually Misty later on in my life. I was like, what? Who's that?
Kasumi,
Misty.
Misty.
Pokemon.
yeah, I know. And I was going to say Satoshi is Ash. And
She's Ash.
what's Brock?
Brock was I don't know.
It was a normal name. I know that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyways, Colin.
Digimon.
So Digimon.
Digimon finally
Finally
have
won
one
one.
of its wins.
Okay, so next we have continuity,
Continuity.
which we kind of talked about, and we'll kind of go deeper into now. Let's go ahead and just talk about continuity and censorship now.
Okay, continuity and such with Pokemon. Well, with the exception of editing episodes, they actually stay pretty close to the original run of how it's supposed to go. In terms of continuity, it's there's a lot of breaks there, but it's more hidden than it is obvious.
Yeah.
For instance, like we talked about with the Tauros, that's a big
Yeah. And what
aspect
about
of it.
overall continuity between like first season in Kanto region, then following into Johto, and then into later seasons? Do you think that there was really an overarching thing, or was that just kind of
no,
like...
those were literally the seasons where, like, okay, you know, like old serials that'll have like Dick Tracy fights the 5-armed man or some crap like that.
Yeah.
Where like none of the stories are linked, but all the characters are the same. It's basically like that.
Yeah.
There's some small aspects of it when like older characters return and all that, but for the most part they stand alone. That's why Ash always ends up being the worst Pokemon trainer in the world again at the beginning of each new season.
Yeah, which is
It's
odd because...
there's no connectivity.
Yeah. Digimon had the grace of having an overarching story, which means that for the most part there was a definite continuity. In second season, they make explicit references to the first season, saying like, because I think even like the later villain of second season was Myotismon, who was a villain that died in the first season, and you get references to. I think in one episode they have a reunion of all the main characters to celebrate the defeat of the Dark Masters and the Helping Digital World, and they definitely characters from the first season that, while not main characters, most of them do play a big part. Like they all appear in like the first several episodes. They all have parts in it, and they all help out the main characters. There's definitely continuity there. When you get the third season, it's kind of all out the window. That's just from personal differences from the production team. But even then, they do reference the first two seasons. It's just that in their continuity, it's a fictional show. Digimon is basically what Digimon is to us.
Yeah.
So I will say it has more continuity in an overall sense. In the series, editing really did keep it very clear. There was no like big missing gaps or anything. At least I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there's no big gaps. They did have some definite filler episodes that kind of just didn't really go anywhere and didn't really have a point. But overall, it was a big overarching story. And with censorship, Digimon had they let a lot more in than you usually would let a series. I think in one point they even make very, very specific biblical references in that the Myotismon arc, when they're back on Earth, basically you summon his powerful form by enacting the number of the beast, and I think he even appears in like a church, and he's supposed to be like a vampire and stuff like that. So what about like censorship?
Oh, censorship in Pokemon. Censorship in Pokemon has actually been one of the more heated arguments about Pokemon as a whole. Because in order to understand a lot of what went into the censorship of Pokemon, you have to understand the company. 4Kids Entertainment kind of changed everything with every show that it got. Yu-Gi-Oh! There was no such thing as death, even though people died in it, constantly.
Yeah.
They all got banished to the Shadow Realm. All the names were changed. Certain scenes were edited. An entire episode was gone. The Tentacruel episode, particularly, had happened just around the time of the 9/11 attacks.
And there's the Porygon episode. There was the
Porygon episode, which was taken away because it had been causing seizures in children in Japan.
The Tentacle episode and the Safari Zone episode were all, and the Porygon episode and the Tentacle episode didn't really have major like point to the story. But the Safari Zone episode did. Yeah. Like, it actually had parts that are referenced later.
There's also minute censorship within episodes that were shown. Like, for instance, the beach episode. We all know about the famous James Bikini censorship. Which, long story short, James is an archetype in Japan known as by shonen, the beautiful male. And he cross-dresses regularly. And there's one scene where he's dressed in a bikini and he has very large fake cans.
Yeah.
And that was taken out entirely. That was ripped completely from the episode. James was actually shown to cross-dress quite frequently on the show, but it was usually either explained away or played for gags, which did occur a lot in the original series. But this particular event actually became a bit of controversy once it was revealed.
Yeah. There are no major censorship moments, just... Because usually the moments that would get censored didn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Season 1, there was one part where they get onto into this fake hotel in the digital world. Like, it was very early on, like I think like around episode 10. Mm-hmm. They find this fake hotel, or they find this hotel that they don't know is fake, and like at one point they go take baths or showers, and at that point like the hotel like fades away, and they're like in towels. And I think that got cut down a bit. It didn't get cut out completely, but it got cut down a bit.
Yeah.
And then season 2, there's a point where they go to like Mexico, and there is a really bad arc called like the International Digidestin arc, which was just very, very badly written. But basically, they go to like Mexico or something, or like France or some country, and they get held up by security. And like security like points guns at them, and that scene got cut out. The episode's still fine, but that scene got cut out. Which I will go ahead and remind you that the reason that the Safari Zone episode got cut completely is because at one point the director of the Safari Zone points a gun at Ash.
Yeah.
In Digimon, that same scene got cut. Like 10 seconds got cut from the episode. In Pokemon, the entire episode
got pulled. That's how bad it was. It's also I think worth noting. There were Pokemon manga came to America as comics.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they were handled as well by 4Kids Entertainment. They might have been, but a lot of that same censorship or the changes followed with it. The names of the characters were changed, but that was congruent throughout all of it.
Yeah.
But more important, that's actually how I learned that they were supposed to be donuts instead of rice balls.
Yeah.
Was through the comics. So there was this whole. Basically, it was all kind of.
You mean rice balls instead of donuts?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that in America they were supposed to be donuts instead of rice balls, but they were actually rice balls.
Yeah.
So that whole thing kind of carried on into all the other aspects of the franchise.
Yeah, and it's odd, and especially with the localization of that Digimon was kind of. It seemed like towards the beginning they weren't exactly sure what they were going to do, because at the very beginning they didn't really make very specific references to where they came from. I think they kind of talk about it at some point, but they don't specifically say. But when they go back to the real world, they do basically say we're from Japan. We're here. All this writing is in Japanese, and they do specifically say they're from Japan, and they make very strong reference to that. Which, if it were handled by another company, they might have changed.
Oh, of course, they would have probably extensively changed it.
Yeah, which I really respect. That they don't really, they don't make a hassle to explain why they're speaking English even though they're Japanese.
Yeah,
it's just an accepted fact. They're Japanese.
Well, I mean, it's yeah, that happens in localization all the time anyway. Judges?
So, judges.
Japanese. What?
Pokemon.
What?
Pokemon? He says Pokemon.
Okay, give me a bullet list. Go.
Ugh.
But why Pokemon, though? Because I think we both agree that Pokemon had worse continuity and censorship.
But the question is whether or not it was better for the series as a whole or not.
Huh.
Which I really don't think could be argued negatively for either of them.
Yeah. They really didn't hurt their series.
Yeah, I mean, localization occurs in everything.
Yeah, they didn't help, but they didn't really hurt.
Yeah.
So,
Or the episodes that were cut were not necessarily essential to the whole storyline.
except the Safari Zone episode.
The Safari Zone only pops up for a minute event in a later episode.
Except it gets used as a visual gag, like every time they cut back to Professor Oak.
And we never know why.
Because you always see him like being run over by a bunch of Tauros that for some reason are just there and are explained to be Ash's Pokemon. Because he does summon a Tauros for the Pokemon League.
Mm-hmm. And up until then, we'd seen every Pokemon he had caught be used.
That's what I'm saying. That one episode is filled in with that later small plot enough that you understand what was going on there.
I guess so.
Sarah?
I still like I like that they don't cut things from Digimon.
Okay.
So are you voting for Digimon?
Okay. So we're at a tie.
Another home trade.
God damn it. Man, I had a killing spree.
Good for you. Next we have music.
I think we already know who's going to take the lead.
Well,
in
not
this.
exactly though, because this entire debate is basically saying which of these made the series better in general.
Mm-hmm.
Music. Okay, so I will say this for both of our ends. Digimon's music was better. It had better music in general.
Yes.
Pokemon's music was much better for the show.
Yes. Well, let me. Pokemon's music, all the things that we remember about Pokemon, with the exception of the theme, I want to be the very best,
Yeah.
was pulled from the games.
Yeah.
So it was already predestined, ready to go.
Yeah.
It's not there. There's very little in terms of original scores. There are some songs in there that I believe were composed specifically for the show, but mostly it's just orchestral reimaginings of songs that already existed.
Yeah.
Digimon had a very good way of creating atmospheric songs, especially with the originals.
Yeah.
In terms of, if we wanted to argue themes, I'd say that Pokemon probably wins in that aspect, because most of Digimon's themes were...
Digimon's themes were garbage.
They were just bad. In terms of overarching music, especially in the terms of creating original music, I think Digimon wins out.
Yeah. Well, it didn't really create any original music, but the music it found.
So it found all the music.
Okay, so first season was very similar to Pokemon in that it used a lot of orchestral music that are from the original series, but it also inserted some songs. A good amount of them were made for the series, like Hey Digimon and a few others. I'll have to look it up in a second. But second season was the one where they started to find more music, and that's where they got some local artists to work on them, and a lot of the more well known stuff from the movies. And the movies is probably had the best soundtrack of the two of them, but we'll talk more about that later. Had some really good songs, but they were not theirs. They just licensed the music to use in them.
Yeah.
So, in general, and yeah, even the songs that they used for the show were still all right. They're still pretty good. Like Hey Digimon is not a very well made song, but it's very catchy. It's extremely catchy. I don't think I can say anything about Pokemon in that same sense, except the theme.
I would disagree, but again, this goes back to the fact that a lot of it is pulled from the game. So whenever we talk about the catchy music from it, we're talking about the music that we heard.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Games.
Can you name any other catchy tune from Pokemon other than the theme?
No, it's because there really aren't any.
But I would say that like a lot of the songs from Digimon that were made for the show are a lot more catchy and were used well enough.
Yeah. And I think a lot of this argument comes down to the legacy as well.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's one of the easiest ways to determine good music is how long it stays relevant.
Yeah, and legacy is another one of our subjects. So, judges, music. Digimon.
Digimon.
We have... See, we thought that Pokemon would be winning this, but it seems
Well,
like...
I don't think we ever expected either of them to win. I just think we know
Yeah.
where Pokemon's going to hit its stride.
Okay. So now we go to characters.
Characters.
So who would you consider the main protagonists and antagonists of Pokemon?
The main protagonist of Pokemon is supposedly Ash, although with the addition of a new character in each region that he arrives, it's sort of almost as though the avatar character, the character that we're supposed to associate with, isn't Ash, and in a sort of way, he's more of a traveler or a mentor or narrator.
Which makes the protagonist his companion.
His companions, exactly.
So in the first...
At least in the next seasons. In the first season, I think it's specifically supposed to be Ash.
Yeah, so who are the three protagonists in the first 3 seasons?
The three protagonists of the first 3 seasons we have Ash, the main character, who we see from the beginning to the end. Misty, who is the gym leader of Cerulean City.
Yeah.
He uses water type Pokemon. She's the girl of the group.
Yeah.
And we have Brock, who is the gym leader of the first city.
First city. What's it called? Pewter?
Yes, Pewter.
Pewter. Yeah.
It's not the first city, but it's the first the city with the first gym.
Yeah.
Because the first city after Pallet Town is Viridian.
Viridian, yeah.
And Pewter City.
Main
He falls around,
antagonist.
and his goal.
Yeah.
Misty doesn't really have a goal. She wants to get her bike. She wants Ash to pay for her bike, which he broke when he stole it.
Yeah.
In order to get Pikachu to the hospital. She at one point claims that her goal is to be the world's greatest everything, but
Yeah.
nah.
And at another point, she says that she was entering like a beauty contest, and she says that she wants to win a doll set. And that was one of her main.
Yeah, that was the part of that censored episode.
Yeah.
And then we have Brock, whose goal, aside from being a Pokemon gym leader, is to become an exceptional Pokemon breeder.
Yeah.
Which he really wants to learn, which is good. In terms of main antagonists, the only really constant antagonists we have is Team Rocket, and more specifically Jesse and James.
Yeah, those are more comedic antagonists.
Exactly.
But I would say in the first season, almost.
In the first season, I would count it as Giovanni, the leader of Team Rocket. That's up to the point.
And that's actually the closest you'll get to an overarching like story
in Pokemon, because after that it's basically just there's no real main antagonist. It's what is Team Rocket doing that's silly and doesn't work.
Yeah, and what is Ash doing? He's going to go get all the badges.
Yeah.
Why? Because he can.
Because he's in a new region and there's all these new Pokemon to discover.
Okay, so and I will say that with Pokemon, you got a very small set of characters that you get to learn really, really well. Digimon's on the other end of the spectrum. There are 8 main characters. And actually, I'll go ahead and say that in Pokemon, there's a fourth protagonist, Pikachu, who actually has a lot of personality.
Of course.
And we learn a lot about him. And there's technically a 5th, which is Togepi.
Togepi is really more of a secondary character, but it's part of the main group, so we'll count it alongside that.
So we'll say they have 4. They'll have 4 main characters, which is 3 human characters
and 1 Pokemon
and 2 Pokemon, which both count as like a half.
Okay, fair enough.
Digimon has 8. Tai, who is the leader, Mimi, who is the Valley Girl, Sora, who is the Tomboy. I don't know why I said Tom Girl. Matt, who's the strong silent type. TK, who's Matt's younger brother. Joe, who's the older, dependable one. Izzy, the tech geek. 5, 6, 7. And Kari, who is Ty's younger sister. We learn a lot about each of these characters through the 50 episodes of the main season. Shh. Sorry, they're talking in the background.
Hey, it's alright.
We learn a lot about them, but it almost feels like we want to know more. Because while we do learn a lot about them, and I guess technically you can count their Digimon as main characters because unlike Pokemon, they can talk. And they have their own like kind of character development.
Well, they have their own hierarchy and everything.
Yeah. So while we do have with Pokemon, we don't get very much of a choice to say who we like more. Because you either have Ash, Misty, or Brock.
Yeah.
That's your 3 choices. You can say you like Pikachu, but by extension you're saying you like Ash too.
Yeah.
With Digimon, you have a big choice on who you can say is your favorite character. In fact, I could basically say like my favorite male character is probably Izzy.
Same here, actually.
Colin, who's your favorite character in first season Digimon? Sarah?
Sorry.
So we have 3 different answers for one season. And if we go to each season, we would have a different answer because... Yeah, they have a smaller cast, but then you also got to include their Digimon, too. But you get a bigger selection on who your favorite is. But at the cost of not being able to develop them as well.
Of course. And, well, a lot of that also comes to the fact that confusion is a big part of what keeps Digimon's story going. The idea of having to discover what's going on.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when you're doing that, there's not a whole lot of time to embellish characters.
And that's where sometimes the story gets in the way. Because while you're trying to learn about these characters, you're spending a lot of time focusing on what the villain is doing as well. And the main antagonist does change throughout Digimon, which could strengthen or weaken depending on how you consider the story. You start with Devimon. You go to Edamon, I think, after that.
Yeah, Edamon.
Edamon, and then I think they go to the main world after that, where they fight Myotismon. And then when they defeat him, they go to the 4 Dark Masters, which is Puppetmon, Machinedramon, Metal Seedramon, and Piedmon. And then after they defeat those, they fight Apocalymon. Those are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 villains. So again, if we ever wanted to really get to know a villain, we didn't get any time because by the time we started to really know about the reason that they're doing everything, they're dead.
Yeah, and we're moving on to the next villain.
So, Pokemon had, in all, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters, protagonists and antagonists that you could focus on, and you really learned about them. Not really Giovanni. Oh, and Gary. You forgot Gary.
Well, Gary is really more of a tertiary character. He's more of a motivation than an actual character that comes in, because eventually he just stops being a rival.
Yeah, he just starts being a person.
Yeah. But he is the initial motivation for Ash to get out there and prove himself, because he really wants to show this guy who's boss and crap like that.
But you have 8 characters that you learn a lot about.
Yes.
Save Giovanni, who you really never...
Giovanni, well, I mean, his motivations we know, but as for his backstory, everything is not really embellished very much. In extent, though, all the other characters are embellished to a great deal.
Yeah. So, yes, there are some continuities that say it's Ash's dad. That doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
So you get to learn a lot about these characters, and you get to know who you want to... You basically don't really have a choice on who you want to like and want to hate. Because there's not much choice. Yeah. Because that's split right in half.
Well, I mean, typically as it goes, you kind of just end up choosing to like all 3 of them together as the group instead of individually.
And Meowth is another character.
Exactly.
If we were to combine all the characters for Digimon, there's between 16 and 18 characters.
Yeah.
There's a lot of characters that you can really hate, and there's a lot of characters that you can really love. You can basically choose one specific one, and it could probably be a different answer from the person sitting next to you. Problem is, you learn nothing about them.
Yeah.
You learn, and I will defend them and say that you do learn a lot about a lot of the main characters, but none of the villains in Digimon have any motivation. Yeah. They're just evil because
they're just evil. Doing it because they can.
Yeah. Yeah, the program, and that's the thing. Because they're digital, they're programmed to be evil.
Can they be honestly evil if it's what they're intended to do?
Yeah.
Is the idea. Because, I mean, particularly, in Pokemon, when we learn Meowth's backstory from Team Rocket, we learn the honest motivation as to why he, learned to talk, learned to walk, and why he turned to a life of crime. He had his heart broken.
Yeah.
We learned, there was an entire episode dedicated to us understanding why he is the way he is. Same with Jesse and with James. We learned that Jesse grew up in a poor background and James grew up in a rich one. Yeah. And they had clashes with their families and eventually left.
Yeah. And we do learn, we learn a lot about why they're like they are. Digimon, by the time we really start to learn about the characters, the season's over and we start a new collection of characters. Mm-hmm. And while in season 2 we do learn a lot about those characters because it's more focused. I think we get 4 new characters in the main arc, which one of the villains becomes one of the heroes. There's still just an overabundance of villains in the second season. You have Ken, You have Myotismon at the end, and I can't even remember who the middle villain is after Ken. What is it? Like who? Like after Ken leaves, who is the villain in Digimon Zero Two?
On his own.
Yeah, I think they were destroying the giant towers for a while.
I don't know.
I really don't know.
There was no villain. It was just evil Digimon.
Yeah, and Season 2 kind of floundered on a lot of that, and we don't really learn about any of the main characters or their motivation. Because we're still focusing on the first season. Basically, Season 2 was a mess.
Yeah.
Season 3 was better. They actually had one real villain, and that was just a character, it was just kind of a general virus that was destroying the digital world. There's also Itmon, who is sometimes hero, sometimes villain, kills one of the main characters, Digimon. Regular stuff.
Yeah.
So really, when it comes down to it, it's Pokemon has a few main characters. What's up?
The villain. It was in the movie. The movie took place after Ken.
Oh yeah. Movie had its own villain, and I think Pokemon was kind of the same. They had Mewtwo, who was kind of a villain.
Yeah, he was featured kind of a little bit in the episodes, but his main arc was in the first movie, which we'll talk on later.
So basically, when we talk about characters, it's
Pokemon had a very select group of people that were very divided on each side, and they were very richly embellished, with the exception of Giovanni.
Whereas Digimon had, but of course the negative to that is you didn't really have a choice on who you wanted to
There wasn't
follow.
a huge variety in who it was that you were.
Whereas Digimon, you had a big variety of characters that you could like or dislike, but they were very
suffered in terms of embellishment.
But they were less dimensional than characters in Pokemon. So judges.
Pokemon for having clear defined characters, roles, and
Okay.
Sure.
Colin says Pokemon.
Digimon had more episodes to describe. I guess it would have been a lot better. I don't know. It doesn't feel like they're.
Which one do you think won?
Fighting.
I think she says Pokemon.
Yeah, I'm going for Pokemon.
Pokemon. All right.
Pokemon finally won its first category.
Yeah, bitch.
So this is going to be a very
Science.
This is going to be a very small category. Creatures.
Okay, well, let's lay out some defining ground rules in terms of creatures. Both creatures, in a lot of the ways, play out the same.
Yeah.
They go through evolutions, although they do it much differently. There's a variety of them. They change state at each evolution, obviously, and become more powerful. There's a large variety of them. Some that can be said as predominantly evil, some that can be said as predominantly good. The good majority of them being neutral, however.
Yeah.
In terms of Pokemon, I think the creatures were more were less, because one of the cool things about Digimon is that within the digital world, humans didn't exist. And the creatures themselves were rather intelligent, depending upon, preference and varieties of intelligence going there. But they were essentially people.
Yeah.
They established their own hierarchies. They had their own towns and communities and fellowships, their allegiances and loyalties, things of that nature. You saw some of that in Pokemon, like with the Squirtle Squad and things of that nature. But on the whole,
the Pikachu collection.
yeah. But on the whole, they were basically just wild animals.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that this is a fault of Pokemon, as it does play into the story really well. But I think Pokemon has a lot more variety in the terms of how the creatures are expressed, but it doesn't really establish that whole aspect of the interesting hierarchies that are developed there. You actually, for a game and series whose main focus supposedly is on learning about the different creatures, you actually learn very little about the Pokemon because you're too busy battling them.
Yeah.
Which I think is a big issue.
I think the biggest separation between them is Pokemon, they're just animals.
Yeah.
For the most part, they're animals. They can't speak, save 3. I think Meowth can speak, Slowbro can speak, and Mewtwo
Slowking can speak.
Slowking can speak, and Mewtwo can speak.
Can communicate.
Both of those, of course, you can't see it, but I'm doing air quotes around those last two. They can speak in that they can communicate with their minds.
Yeah.
In Digimon, they're more just creatures. They have their own towns, their own populations.
They're intelligent, sentient beings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but In Pokemon, it makes sense because that's where the universe is kind of built around.
Yeah.
I wouldn't actually say that it makes a terrible amount of sense in Digimon. Because even though it's its own world and it has its own hierarchy, they feel too much like they're just kind of parodies of humanity.
Of people.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I'll say that it's done well enough to where when you have such a diverse collection of creatures, you can only do so much with them.
Mhm.
And they did it, and they did what they could do. You have the one that's shaped like a star. He's a sheriff. And he's, for some reason, in this big town.
Yeah.
That's just a big town. I think it's empty.
Yeah.
He's just the sheriff of it because he's a star thing. Shut up. Put myself on Do Not Disturb. So I'll go ahead and say, I don't even know if we need a judge's opinion on this, but I'll go ahead and say that Pokemon...
Well, in Pokemon, I feel it's more organic to the actual universe that these things exist. Where in Digimon, they literally had to invent another universe for this to take place in.
If you can argue that the fact that it is weird is... It works because it's a different universe.
Yeah.
So, actually, we'll have the judges say on this. Sarah.
I like the world of Digimon, but it's too weird for me. I like how Pokemon felt in this way. They did a very good job with their
That's one for
world.
Pokemon.
One for Pokemon.
Though I'm a fan of the multiverse theory, I'm also going to say Pokemon.
Oh, Pokemon won 2 in a row. For
Yeah.
characters and creatures. So next we have dialogue.
Dialogue.
Both of these, this is probably the weakest for both of them.
Oh, God. This is an issue you run into when it comes to dubbing.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, there is a lot of dubbing out there that is done quite well. For instance, Fullmetal Alchemist won a lot of awards for dubbing, and that's because there's a lot of great dubbing in that show. It's actually handled pretty well.
Cowboy Bebop, Outlaw Star.
Cowboy Bebop, Outlaw Star. Well, I mean, there's tons of them, especially in more of the adult series. They tend to treat it a lot more fairly. In kids series, you don't see that as much because they're more about the packaging.
The rule of kids series when dubbing is sound is good, never have silence.
Exactly.
So throughout the series, you'll have characters just speaking because they can speak. They'll be throwing out jokes, references. Sometimes their mouths won't even be moving, and they'll just be speaking.
They'll just be talking.
I'm going to go ahead and say Pokemon. I think Pokemon is much worse in this.
Pokemon is rife with terrible jokes and dialogue that there's no reason for it to be there. Like, none at all. Like, I can't even point out to you, like, a specific example, because it's literally everything. It's their bread and butter from getting from scene to scene.
Yeah.
It's just how they do things. Like, every time, okay, you know how in shows there'll be a reaction shot. Something shocking will happen, and you'll have that freeze frame of the characters going like, somebody's saying something during that scene. Nobody's mouth is moving. They're all too in shock to do anything, but somebody's just explaining what has happened.
Yeah.
In it. Even though we already know about it.
And
It's just ridiculous.
both the series are guilty of this, but one of the things, I think actually Digimon's more guilty of it. One of the things that always bothered me, and this is just my own personal problem, they would have a character say something, and then would cut to commercial, and when it came back from commercial, it would be the exact same scene, but the character would say something different. It's literally the exact same scene that they went to commercial with, but they would cut back and the character would say something completely different that's similar.
Yeah, the same thing with different wording.
Yes.
And it's like,
There's no point to it. And I think, because I don't think Pokemon had really any cutaways during any major action scenes, but Digimon had a lot of fight scenes in it, and they would be doing fight scenes, of course, that had a bunch of quirks and, like, just quick-witted
I mean, and this
comments.
happens a lot in 4Kids. I mean, you see this parodied in Yu-Gi-Oh! The Bridge series. When he puts those actual 4Kids dialogue.
Yeah.
The sun will be up in a couple of hours. Who the hell are you talking to? Why is that necessary?
So, yeah, it's I will say that Pokemon, I think, is just more filled with inane dialogue.
Yeah. I will go ahead and give that.
So, do you guys agree? Which one is better in that regard?
Do you want me to ignore the Japanese version?
Yes, we're
Yes.
talking about the American versions.
Okay, I didn't understand that part. I was like, huh? What do you think about it? Colored?
I'd definitely say that Digimon would win because it has less, just rambling.
Okay.
Sarah?
To admit, Pokemon did get annoying.
Painfully so.
Painfully annoying watching it. And I'm just like, why is Misty yelling? Wait, didn't she just yell at her sister? Wait, now she's yelling at Ash? Wait, she's not even turned toward Ash.
Yep. So I think we basically agreed that Digimon's better about it. So yeah, I'll give that to Digimon. Next, we have acting.
One of the cornerstones of acting in Pokemon is the fact that if they're going to do it, they're going to overdo it to the nines. Well, and actually, I actually argue for this enriching the series because Pokemon, so much of it is slapstick screwball comedy. So they do that actually really well.
Yeah.
You particularly see this a lot with the duo, Jesse and James, who are just inept at everything that they do.
Who plays James? That is...
I can't tell you the name of it, but here, yeah, we're gonna find it. Well, he changed. I think he was the same for the first 3 episodes. Was it?
Yeah.
Or was it more than that?
He was. Yeah.
He changed pretty early on.
Yeah. Here, I'll go ahead and look it up. But they were kind of more downplayed at the beginning, the acting of the series. Here, Jesse and James. But as it kind of went on, you'll especially see this in James and Brock get a lot more hyperactive.
Yeah. They get crazy because that's because their jokes are developing. Their character isn't really decided at the beginning, and it becomes more and more so as the series goes on.
Okay, Eric Stewart is the main
Yeah.
one of.
Now, a lot of the characters that are serious remain the same. Professor Oak is usually muted, even when he's making a joke. That's that's fascinating, shocking, isn't it? Some say it has an electric personality. It's muted and it's the serious character, and that's not played so much. It's played for laughs, but it's played in the sort of rube to the straight man kind of stuff. And I actually, although it's nothing stellar, I do appreciate a lot the acting in Pokemon because it's about on par with what you would find in a lot of dubbing for children's entertainment.
Yeah. So you're saying it was very overacted and very well done, but it works to the benefit of Pokemon.
Yeah, definitely.
There was a lot of overacting in Digimon. I would say more in the creatures than the actual characters.
Yeah.
I know Mimi, TK, and Tai were more like out there characters, but the rest of them were just kind of very muted.
Mm-hmm.
Where they weren't like personalityless, but they were more just they'll deliver dialogue as the character in it's supposed to go. Even when they're kind of acting ridiculous, they kind of downplay the performance a little bit.
Yeah.
They changed that in season 2 more, where you have characters like Yoli and Davis were more out there and more outspoken.
Yeah.
And in season 3, they kind of go back to the first one where the characters are much more. I wouldn't say like downplayed. I'd say more believable. Believable to what a person would actually act like in that situation.
Yeah.
And I'll say that it doesn't really act to the benefit, but it doesn't really go against it either.
Yeah.
They could have used a little more overacting since it's a kid's show, and like Pokemon, it was kind of made in the same sense in that when a character kind of freaks out, they're supposed to they can show it in their voice too, and that happens in Pokemon a lot. When a character freaks out, they freak out.
Yeah. Well, and this is one of the things I actually found kind of weird when I would watch Digimon is a lot of the pace of it seems very stagnant.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this comes from the fact that so many of the characters are just serious and muted. You see it a lot less with the Digimon, which I think is mainly because there's so many of them. All the actors are trying to, differentiate between. By the way, fun game to play. Every single voice actor in the dubbing community has been in Digimon at some point.
Yeah.
Every one of them.
Including the ever so famous oh my god, I just forgot his name.
I know who you're talking about, but I can't remember.
Cowboy Bebop.
How have we forgotten his name?
Cullen. Main character
Wrong guy.
God damn it.
the guy that plays,
Right?
Spike.
yes, Spike Spiegel, who sounds nothing like his famous
Oh
voice.
my gosh.
Steve Bloom.
Steve Bloom,
Steve
the famous Steve Bloom,
Steve Bloom, who in
Sorry, Steve.
who sounds like this the entire time.
yes, and in season 3 he plays He plays the main character's Digimon Guilmon, who has a very silly voice.
Mhm.
And they never asked him to do that voice.
Oh yeah, he just came in and did it.
Yeah, no. I mean, after that, they never really asked him to do that voice ever again.
I know.
Which I find sad because it's my favorite voice.
That's
of
Steve
his.
Bloom though. That's his because he's done a variety of voices. He can
Yeah.
do different voices,
But everybody
they never
asked,
ask him to.
everybody asked him to do Spike Spiegel.
But anyway, that's another podcast for another time.
Yeah,
The Steve Bloom podcast.
Steve Bloom.
So yeah, and it's always kind of it's weird though. In season 1, the creatures, the Digimon, were more kind of out there and more kind of crazy voices, while the characters were more kind of subdued.
Mm-hmm.
In season 2, the humans were more out there and kind of crazy, while the Digimon were kind of more subdued. Because that season you had Armadillomon and what's that stupid bird? Hawkmon, who were very subdued characters and also very bad characters.
Mm-hmm.
Vmon's kind of the exception there. He was kind of the most out there character. And then in season 3, you'd have the more subdued human characters, but then you go back to having the more out there Digimon characters with Guilmon and Terriermon. Renamon was very subdued, who was Rika's Digimon.
Yeah.
So yeah, it worked to a degree, but it could have been more.
Yeah.
So, judges, what do you think? So we're saying acting, Pokemon or Digimon?
I don't know. I got really lost during that conversation.
I'm gonna say that Digimon had the worst acting. Honestly.
So you're voting
for Pokemon.
Let's vote for Pokemon, and
Sarah?
you're saying.
Oh my god, I do love all the actors that showed up.
So we're not saying that they were bad
I know,
actors.
I know.
Now, I'm clearing up.
Which do you feel suits the show better?
Let's see.
Oh, well, that being the case.
Well, I compare it to the Japanese. It's nothing like the Japanese, and I just.
Well, we're not comparing Japanese because there's a
I know. The
whole different
acting is
argument.
whole different.
Yeah.
I'm gonna still say Pokemon is.
I do like Pokemon better. It's
Okay.
Pokemon?
more
Okay.
Well for children.
So now we're starting to get more towards the middle. I think.
I wish I-
We're pretty much even. Oh,
Yeah.
now we're not.
No, we're even.
Pokemon's got 3 and Digimon's got 2.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so we are even. Good.
Okay. The first movie.
The first movie.
Oh, the movie that made you
Let
cry.
me say, this was literally called Pokemon.
The
First movie. There is a subtitle that only appeared within the actual within the actual video of the film and in the novelization as Mewtwo Strikes Back.
Mewtwo Strikes Back is something different.
Is it?
Yes,
Really?
it's a mini series based on the movie.
Huh. I know, that's what it was called in the novelization. I don't know. But Pokemon, the
Yeah.
first movie.
Mewtwo Strikes Back was like 2 episodes from the main series.
That's dumb. At least that works better than literally calling the first of something Strikes Back. With the exception of Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back.
Yeah. So
Empire Strikes Back.
so
Empire
yeah,
Strikes Back.
I'm gonna go ahead and announce the winner for this,
Okay.
and that's Pokemon. Because
Really?
Pokemon,
God damn.
while Pokemon was kind of not a very well-made movie, it was a much better movie than Digimon, and I'll explain this in a technical sense. Pokemon had a story
Mm-hmm.
that started at the beginning and ended at the end,
Mm-hmm.
and each part of the interior of the film had to do with the overarching story.
Mm-hmm.
Digimon did not have that. And you ask, how can a movie not have a story that starts at the beginning and ends at the end? Well, I'll tell you why. Because Digimon is not a movie. It's 3 movies gutted to make 1. And it's awful. Literally, they have 3 different films from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
I think like one of them's called like Digimon Adventures, like one's called like War Games, and I can't remember the third one. And like one's called like Diaboromon Strikes or something.
Diaboromon Escape.
Diaboromon Escape or something like that. They're three completely different films that all have their own continuity and have nothing to do with the other than the fact that they share characters. When we get to the American version, they basically said we can't sell a movie that's 20 minutes long. No one will buy that. We can't sell a movie that's 40 minutes long. We can't buy that. And by that point, when we got to the third movie, which is 60 minutes long, and they could sell that, they said we're not going to. So they said all these movies have a villain. They're not the same villain, but they have a villain. So why don't we just make them the same villain and cut it all into one movie? And that's what they did. They took all three movies, they shoehorned in some story about there being like an evil virus that infects each of these Digimon, and that he shows his face at the end, quote unquote, but he's apparently present through all of it. This is not true. They have nothing to do with each other. And in fact, it was so badly shoehorned in and so badly done and so badly edited and so badly rewritten that when it came to paying people to act in the film, there are certain rules in the Screen Actors Guild and the Voice Actors Guild that certain roles will be paid certain amounts. A dubbing role will be paid less than a full acting role. They had them do the movie, and they tried to pay them a dubber's amount, which is less than a regular voice acting role. And the Screen Actors Guild actually contacted them and said, "This is not a dub. You changed so much in the story that we cannot legally allow you to call this a dub." So they forced them to pay them full wages because they changed the story so much.
Okay.
I didn't say they changed it better. They just changed it. So Digimon first movie was awful.
With that precedent being set, let's talk about Pokemon the first movie. Pokemon the first movie opens with the introduction of a mysterious Pokemon from the beginning of time or some crap like that. It's an ancient Pokemon named Mew. No, it's not from the beginning of time, but the idea is it's one of the first really mystical Pokemon that we see. It has been cloned and turned into Mewtwo, who is capable of telepathic communication, voiced by Dan Green, veteran voice actor at 4Kids Entertainment, known best for playing Yugi and Yami in Yu-Gi-Oh! He is upset at his creators, destroys the lab, and is found by Giovanni, who convinces him that they should become partners. He later finds out that Giovanni only was literally paid for his creation so they could fight for him and considered him a toy like anything else. Gets mad, starts his own island. Causes a huge storm after inviting all these people to his island. Few people brave the storm and get to the island. He steals their Pokemon and clones them into super beings. Big battle between the clones and the regulars happens, and Mewtwo learns the tragic truth that what happens when we're born is irrelevant. It is what we do with the gift of life that determines who we are. La-di-da-di-da. Ash dies, the Pokemon cry, comes back to life, everybody flies off.
It's a dumb story.
It's a dumb story, but it is a story.
Let me tell you what happens in Pokemon the first movie. The first part of the movie, and it's still split into three parts, and yet we're supposed to believe that these three differently animated movies are the same movie.
Are you talking? I think you mean Digimon, the first movie.
Digimon. Digimon is in three parts. And the first part, we see them basically as children, as small children. These giant Digimon come down. When we start small, they become friends with it. Becomes bigger, starts destroying the city, fights a giant parrot, as such happens, and they disappear. And that's the end of that one. What?
Godzilla versus Mothra.
Shut up.
It is worth noting that even though, as is typical with Pokemon, the continuity is in a sense broken after each season, this movie happened right after the end of the first season, and it is still technically supposed to be tied to the continuity of the first.
Yeah.
At the end of the film, once Mewtwo has erased the memories of everything that's happened, making the entire point of the story moot and useless, Ash sees Mew flying off into the distance and makes reference to the very first episode of Pokemon where he saw a really rare Pokemon, and he believes he just saw one again. So in the sense, it does sort of tie the story from the beginning to the end together. It's just that everything in between is completely useless.
There is continuity in this one, too. Because there's actually a big part in the series that they say they first saw a Digimon in Heightened Buterus, and that's what we see. Mm-hmm. In the first part of the film, they actually do make reference to Heightened Buterus.
Okay.
Apparently, so in this continuity, the evil thing gets infected into the computer in the second part of the film, and they fight an evil computer virus, which they blah, 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 send Digimon in. They fight. Oh my god, they're losing. Oh, let's reach to the computer. Oh, now we're in the computer. Oh, look, our Digimon can combine. We never explained this before, but they can combine, by the way. They fight the evil thing with Omnimon, which is, of course, a very sensible name, because he is now the Alpha and the Omega of Digimon. And he kills him. Except he doesn't kill him, because the evil comes back in the third part. We don't know what none of this evil is, but it's evil, you see.
Evil Data? Oh my god.
It's evil Data, and it comes back because
They
shoehorn in a part. They shoehorn in a part of the second part where there's a character that's in the third part who is cheering on Ty and Izzy to fight and Matt, and third part happens and his Digimon is the evil thing, and the evil thing is now in New York for some reason, and all the Digidestined go to New York because they can go there.
I feel like you deserve an Emmy for that presentation.
Colorado, sorry. They're in New York originally because they're with Mimi.
In New York, then how'd they get to Colorado? I don't understand.
3 different movies!
It's 3 different movies.
They got to Colorado by train.
Yeah, they did go by train.
It was a Japanese
He's absolutely right. They do start in New York and then they go to Colorado from there because they can. And then they fight the evil, and there's a cutout part of it where they kidnap the original Digidestined and make them children, and has no point in the actual story, and they defeat the evil, and it's done. This movie's done, and I wasted money on it.
So judges?
And I bought 2 versions of this movie before. I have it on VHS and DVD. This movie's awful.
Sad man.
You know what? I'm not even gonna fucking ask the judges. Fucking Pokemon won that.
I love Pokemon. It made me cry. Whatever makes children cry.
Did it make you cry magical tears that turn stone back into living flesh?
I was like,
Which you gotta wonder, what kind of attack were they throwing at each other that turned a human being into stone?
They were throwing every attack ever.
sorry, Digimon. How in the world did that what? How did it make them younger? I didn't understand that part.
Alright, next up.
We're not talking about that anymore.
Next up.
It was not. It did not.
Vigigames.
So I think we know the winner of this one too. Because
Well, I mean, Pokemon began as a video game. That's really literally the franchise stands. And as I just purchased today, as today is the release, is still going strong. Pokemon X and Y has just been released, and that's where Pokemon has its core. That's where all the changes come from. That's where the different regions from the different seasons occur. That's where we get everything in the universe. It's from the games. With the exception of Jesse and James, who had to be created in order to be placed into the special Pikachu edition, along with a Pikachu that follows you around. Which was awesome. That was my favorite.
Our judge has raised his hand. What is up?
Judge would like to weigh in that if you look closely at least one of the original Team Rocket cutouts, it looks surprisingly like James in a black uniform.
Okay.
Good for that. Anyways. Anyways. Digimon did start as a game.
Did it?
It started as a Tamagotchi.
That's right, it did!
It didn't start as a video game, really, but it did start as a game where you had creatures that you take
A
care
life
of.
simulator.
That you take care of, and you could battle between each other. So technically, it was
I remember
a game.
that, actually.
And it was based off that. It's just that with Pokemon, there was more of a story that they could hop off of, whereas Digimon, they literally had to create a story.
Mm-hmm.
And then they started to really develop the video games, and Digimon is weird in that, despite being based on a game, when it kind of started to make full video games of it, they weren't very successful. The first Digimon video game, which is Digimon World on the PlayStation in America. There were actually a lot more in Japan. There were stuff for the Wonder Swan Color, which never got released in America, so we never played those. But the first one was called Digimon World for the PlayStation, and it was a buggy, almost broken game. And I think this was around the time that... it was almost around the time that Gold and Silver were coming out, so it was like 2000.
Right on.
So I forget when Gold and Silver came out. But
Gold and Silver came out.
that was 2000, right?
It was right around the time. I was just starting middle school.
2000, 2001?
Yeah.
Somewhere around there. So it looked like a better game because it was graphically much bigger because it had 3D graphics and stuff like that. Whereas Pokemon has always
still
been
2D sprites.
Yeah, and Pokemon did have its other games. It had
Pokemon Coliseum.
Pokemon Coliseum.
Pokemon Snap.
Pokemon Puzzle League.
I think you're playing those games.
Yep. Poke Pinball.
Pokemon Pinball was a great game.
Yep. Digimon kind of squandered for a while. It had some games that were kind of worth. Had some fighting games. I think it really didn't... The point where it would have gotten better, by that point, people had kind of forgotten about it.
Yeah.
Because you have... there's some DS games, like Pokemon Dawn and Dusk. Or not, I said Pokemon. Digimon Dawn and Dusk were DS games that apparently were not all that bad. But by that point, it
just kind of died and petered out.
Yeah. So, basically, I can ask the judges, but they're going to say the same thing. Pokemon or Digimon?
I wanted to play a Digimon game, but I had to say Pokemon because Bob is lame.
Okay, and we have them both saying Pokemon, but...
Fun fact about the Pokemon games. The game that determines whether or not you catch a Pokemon with the Pokeball is actually based on an algorithm, and because of this, it is possible for the Master Ball to fail. It's like 0.001%, but it is entirely possible for the Master Ball to fail. People were really mad when they figured this out.
And now you know.
And knowing is half the battle.
Yep.
Okay, come on.
So before we get to our last one, we have two bonus categories here. Last episode.
Last episode.
Last episode, and I've made this a bonus category because it's kind of hard to really...
Yeah.
consider.
I honestly, I barely remember the last episode of Pokemon.
Yeah, Pokemon didn't really have a last episode.
Yeah,
because
I mean, it's technically still going.
It never stopped.
Yeah. But if we're talking about the first season, I honestly count the first movie as the last episode in terms of the first season or the first arc.
Yeah. Well, no, because they went to the Pokemon League after that, remember?
That's right, they did.
So the last episode is kind of where he lost.
Yeah.
It kind of just left. And
Yeah.
from there...
Yeah, I didn't think it was great.
Digimon really was the one that had the last episode. Because it had a last episode.
Yeah.
Season 1 had a definite episode where it
A
ended.
definitive end.
Yeah. Because it had where they defeated the Apocalymon after dying and coming back to life, because, that happens. They defeat him, Digital World's saved, and they basically are forced to leave. And at that point, we don't know if they're ever going to come back, except, at the very end, they have a preview for the next season where they do. So it's kind of ruined. Second season had probably one of the worst endings, but that's just personal preference because it just wasn't a very well done ending. It's kind of like it almost felt like they were kind of forced to end it, and they just kind of threw everything that they could at it. Third season had an ending very reminiscent to the first season, where they won, but their Digimon are basically not allowed to stay, so they're kind of forced to leave. So they definitely had endings, and I think they were actually very strong emotional endings, save season 2. Because there's that whole idea that they probably will never see them again. So there's that.
Right on.
There's no real vote there since it's a bonus category, but what do you guys think? Pokemon and Digimon had the better...
Digimon. More
Digimon
emotional.
had an end.
Yeah. So
Pokemon doesn't count. Pokemon doesn't count.
Pokemon never really ended.
I mean, like,
Pokemon's kind of like Inuyasha.
do you you call it? Do you say it ends when he gets defeated by his rival, the other rival that looks like him, or what? Or when he actually starts crying?
Yeah.
Because when he gets defeated by Gary, the series ended like 6 episodes in.
Yeah.
That dude always lost.
Did he ever fight Gary just one-on-one?
I don't know. I can barely remember. Fun story about, but the fun one of the fun aspects of Pokemon's formula. Ash fights twice in every battle that he does, and he always loses the first time. That's how he has to grow as a character.
Oh, you learn nothing from victory.
And the other one is okay. So that's technically Digimon's win.
Yes, that's the win of Digimon.
And the other bonus category I had was card games.
A Pokemon card game existed and was a huge phenomenon, not for the playability of it, though. Pokemon's card game was essentially a dumbed-down version of the Pokemon battle system from the games, which already didn't involve a huge heft of strategy.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, I would get rid of any attack that didn't inflict actual damage or cause them to fall asleep and become poisoned.
Yeah.
And I think most people sat to this strategy. But the Pokemon card game, as a trading aspect and collectability, was huge. It took off. There were tons of different books published about different cards, their rarity, their worth monetarily, how to find them. There were huge tournaments that were brought together where kids only focused on trading the cards. They battled with them, but they didn't really care.
Yeah.
But the Pokemon card game was a huge deal.
And I only have one thing to say about the Digimon card game.
Mm-hmm.
You and me tried to play it.
Yeah.
Keyword, what's the keyword there?
Tried.
Why did we not play it?
I couldn't understand how it worked.
I do.
Neither could I. No, we literally got the booster pack with like 2 decks of cards in it.
Yeah.
And we tried. We really did. Like, we sat there and we read the instructions several times over. And when we thought we understood it, we played. And
it didn't work. It didn't.
So, yeah. So, I'll go ahead and ask the judges, even though we know what the answer is. Card games, Pokemon or Digimon?
I think they were both lame.
If you had to pick one.
I would say Pokemon was better.
I like
Pokemon?
the Digimon game. I played it
So,
successfully.
do you want to go with Digimon or Pokemon?
But I don't even know how to play Pokemon. I don't even know how to play Digimon, to be honest, but I played it my own way.
Yeah, so you didn't play it. You played it in your
I
own
did
way.
play it according to the color code, like it told me how to play it.
Which one did you
But
like
I
more?
couldn't figure out.
Do you have a basket full of Pokemon cards?
Yes.
Do you have a basket full of Digimon cards?
Yes.
So we're
Okay,
having
here's the difficult part. They never released the cards that help them Digiball.
They did in booster packs.
They did, but the thing is, most of them that came in the sets, they didn't have it. So, like, you would have this Shogomon. It will evolve into something else. And I couldn't do it because it
No,
was
Pokemon or Digimon?
just a Pokemon.
Yes!
Okay. And actually, I'll go ahead and go off of what she said. And I'll go ahead and say here, if you hear a bunch of interference, it's because I'm moving the mic around so you can hear them. But I'll go ahead and go on top of what she said. Not only did they not have the evolutions of Digimon, even worse, they had evolutions of Digimon that weren't in the pack. There were some Digimon where you had the evolution, but you didn't have the starter.
Yeah.
And that was awful, because I remember I had some, and I could never play them because I didn't have a way to
And
get
you
to
remember
them.
the first Pokemon starter pack had Machop, Machoke, Machamp.
Yep.
Everything was even. It's all good.
Yep. So, Pokemon won that. And now we get to the last one. The Legacy.
The legacy. Pokemon. I don't think there's enough time to talk about the legacy that Pokemon has left. We have games, anime, comics, movies, books, 2 entirely separate forms of tournaments that are played constantly, spin-off games, consoles decorated like the characters, plushes, merchandise, friggin' hats, footwear, pants, shirts, costumes, birthday party supplies,
That are still around. All these are still around.
theme parks, and in Japan, not in America, an airline. Poke Air.
Which, by the way, someone found a little while ago that they were selling the Pikachu Beetle. like at a used car shop.
Oh my god!
It's kind of off topic, but I did see the picture of it. It's kind
That is so cool.
and yeah, and there's another one, Cars.
Yeah, cars.
Don't tell it.
Pick a car. Just all of it there.
And Digimon at its height had a bunch of that too. It didn't have airplanes
Yes.
or cars, but it did. There was a point where Digimon and Pokemon, for a very short time, were at the same level.
Yeah.
I remember that Digimon's premiere beat the season premiere of Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it was second season or first season, but right around the time when Johto started, we didn't know Johto was a bad series yet. But right around the time Johto started, season 1 or 2 of Digimon premiered and actually beat it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that speaks volumes about it because after that they stayed around the same level. Because they were played around the same time.
Yeah. And they were kind of played competitively, essentially.
I think Digimon played second. I think, but they were played in the same hour.
Yeah.
Like, you could watch Pokemon first, then you flip a channel, and you could watch Digimon afterwards. So, Digimon had a legacy, though. And I think it's kind of an understated legacy. It kind of... Pokemon, I will definitely say, had a stronger one.
Yeah.
You can definitely see elements of what Pokemon is today.
Mhm.
But I think Digimon had a much more subtle legacy in that it was considered one of the earlier competitions, like direct competitions in anime. Because you had earlier ones, you had series that kind of competed against each other and were argued which was better. Like in Japan, you had like Outlaw Star, Cowboy Bebop, or Trigun, or stuff like that. This was the first direct competition, really. This is the first one where they kind of spawned and when you create a genre, it's never really about what the first one was.
Yeah.
It's about what the second one is. Because it's not a genre until you have
a repeat.
Yeah. And Pokemon is considered the creator of the monster genre. The collectible monster genre. But it was Digimon that kind of really helped it become
Well,
one.
and I think, and this is probably the reason that we in this podcast are talking about the competitive edge of the fan base. This is the reason that it's like this, because you have Pokemon, which is the obvious hit, the big grander one, lots of merchandising, but it's childlike, it's not as deep, it's fun and colorful.
Yeah.
You have Digimon, the underground hit. A lot of the ways it plays the same way, but it's more subtle, it's more serious. There's a lot more depth in a lot of it. It's allowed to be more adult in some situations. And that's why they play off so well against each other, and why people, I think, argue and fret about it so much.
Yeah, I think Pokemon has a much more obvious legacy.
Yeah.
Whereas Digimon kind of was the subconscious legacy.
Mm-hmm.
People will never admit it because they really don't know, but there are elements of Pokemon that kind of seep into the main viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And even Pokemon has done it now.
Yeah.
Pokemon will never admit that they stole something from Digimon. I'm saying stole in the nicest term. In Pokemon XY, there's now Mega Evolution.
Yep.
Which
is literally just Digi-evolution.
It's well, first off, in America, the final evolution for a Digimon is Mega.
Yeah.
And in Pokemon, Mega is the final evolution for some Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's temporary, which is the two main elements of Digimon. The final one is Mega, and they're temporary. They always return back to their earlier form.
Yep.
And along with that, some people have pointed out that probably one of the more famous Pokemon, other than Pikachu, is a Charmander.
Mm-hmm.
And they noticed that his final form and Agumon from Digimon's final form
mm-hmm.
have the same color code, and that just kind of that just happened because they're both orange.
Yep.
But they notice now that with Charizard's Mega Evolution, he now has the same color code as Wargreymon, which was the quote-unquote palette swap of Wargreymon in Season 2. And that's probably just, coincidence. But I would almost say that's just kind of with the Mega Evolution and some stuff like that. And there have been other elements too, especially with the later Digimon games. That I think they're just kind of saying, like, they're just giving a nod to the fact that Digimon was a thing.
Yep.
And you can say it's the loser, and you know what? I'll even say it's the loser, but it still exists today. There's still series. And it definitely had an impact, even if it wasn't as strong as...
It's definitely got to stick around.
Yeah. So, judges, who had the better legacy?
Might I mention before this happens, Pokemon had a float in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
I'm going to go ahead and say Pokemon because you can't go higher than the air, and the Poke Air is number one. Oh, wait. This is not product placement.
And Sarah?
Pokemon commercialism. They did it.
They did leave a
And
They
legacy.
did it.
But you guys make me want to go out and make my own Trailmon.
So, obviously, let's
I guess
count
I
it up.
should make
Let's count it up.
counterfeit
Hold on. I'll do it.
Digimon
I'll do it.
figure
Okay.
use.
1, 2, 3, 4,
Guess I should get into the Digimon selling.
4. Oh, no. Hold on. Let's go.
Touchy making.
1, 2, 3, 4. And 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like the winner's Monster Rancher.
What?
What?
This whole argument is mute.
See you guys in hell.
The winner, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 4 is Pokemon.
Woo!
And I said at the beginning that Pokemon was going to win.
There will be no celebration at the Digidome tonight.
But I will say that that in the end we have decided that Digimon that while Pokemon came first, Digimon has a strong second.
Of course it does. Of course it does. It lost with grace.
It lost with grace. So
both the series have very strong merits and attractions, and if you didn't see either, or you didn't see one or the other, definitely check them out, guys.
yeah, definitely.
They're very cool. If you're a fan of one, you're likely to become a fan of the other. You may not be as big a fan as the other. You may still choose a favorite, but they're both series that played very well off of each other. Check them out.
Yep.
Just remember that Pokemon won.
So I've been Zach, the Digidestined.
I've been Evan, the Pokemon Master.
I have been Cullen, your first judge.
Sarah, the second judge.
We'll see you guys later.
Take care. Oh, and enjoy Pokemon X and Y.